January 3, 1943, Dobadura Airfield, New Guinea. Before sunrise, moist jungle air clung to the corrugated metal of the revetments. A thin mist drifted over the runway like a pale, restless tide. The silhouettes of grounded P-38 Lightnings loomed in the dim violet light twin boom shapes, half swallowed by darkness, their aluminum skins beaded with night dew. Nearby, an American ground crewman named Merle Shorty Keene crouched beneath one of the fighters, a spool of thin aviation wire balanced on his knee. The only sound was the quiet click of metal as he tightened the makeshift loop inside the Lightning's control linkage. The jungle beyond the airstrip was still, yet he moved with urgency. Every morning meant another air battle creeping closer. Another fight where American pilots climbed into cockpits wondering whether their machine could match the Japanese Zero plane that had, for over a year, dominated the skies of the Pacific like a phantom hunter. Keene wiped the moisture from his hands, pulled the wire taut, and exhaled. The fix had to hold, not because engineering manuals demanded it, but because pilots' lives depended on it, and because he had watched too many Lightnings return with stories of controls freezing at high speed, of death pressing against the fuselage, faster than any warning could be shouted. He tightened the last twist just as the sky began to lighten. The day's battle was coming. What Keene did next would ripple across the Pacific Air War, altering the balance inside an arena where skill and courage were not enough. Without machinery capable of surviving the Zero's deadly maneuvers, it began with a single, stupid wire trick. Before this moment, the P-38 Lightning was both feared and doubted. It carried immense firepower, its nose 4.50 caliber machine guns wrapped around a 20mm cannon, but pilots whispered of a darker truth. At high speeds, the aircraft could betray them. In steep dives, the controls stiffened, the nose dropped harder, and many young flyers felt the irreversible pull toward the ground, as though the plane itself had turned into cold steel. This was compressibility, an aerodynamic curse few had ever experienced. And the Japanese Zero, nimble, feather-light, and deadly at low speeds, exploited it mercilessly. Japanese pilots entered combat believing their Zero's agility was unassailable. Their training emphasized precision turns, knife-edge cuts, and sudden climbs. For a year and a half, they danced through Pacific airspace with almost arrogant confidence. Their aircraft was a creature of instinct, lightweight, responsive, and made for pilots who expected the enemy to always break away first. But what they did not expect was a twin-engine American brute that could dive faster than their eyes could. Track if only the controls would respond. Early in 1943, as battles intensified over New Guinea and the Solomons, American pilots pushed their Lightnings harder than the design originally intended. Combat reports told of moments when, during high-speed dives meant to escape a Zero's turning radius, the controls locked. Planes plunged nearly vertically. Some pilots blacked out. Others fought to pull up only to feel the stick refuse their strength. The Zero pilots interpreted this as confirmation. American aircraft were fast, yes, but fundamentally flawed. Japanese records from early 1943 described the P-38 as heavy in movement and unable to execute high-speed reversal. Their confidence grew with every Lightning that failed to pull up in time. And yet, American ground crews refused to accept these limitations as fate. They worked sleepless hours, testing mechanical adjustments, adjusting tension, examining failures, searching for anything that could give pilots control in the critical second before. Compressibility dragged them into oblivion. This is where Merle, Keene the mechanic, few outside his squadron ever knew entered the story. He had spent years tinkering with machinery long before the war. He understood metal not as a structural element, but as something almost alive. When pilots described the control lockup, he imagined not charts or airflow equations, but the physical tension in cables and pulleys. He'd crawl beneath the aircraft, flashlight clamped in his jaw, and studied the Lightning's elevator system, The elevators, responsible for pitch control, relied on a system of cables. Under extreme aerodynamic forces, the cables strained. The linkage stiffened. The surfaces at the tail resisted movement. A pilot could be full of strength, but the aircraft would not answer. Keene believed he could counter this stiffness with something simple: a short section of wire designed to support the cable tension when airflow overwhelmed it. He anchored the wire to relieve stress at a critical point in the elevator linkage. The idea was crude, unapproved, and entirely experimental. When he showed it to others, some laughed. Others warned him such a modification might get him reprimanded. But the Lightning that flew the next day returned with a new kind of report. The controls had not frozen. The dive had been fast, terrifyingly fast, but the elevators responded. The pilot lived. Word spread through the squadron, then through the airfield. Soon through the entire 5th Air Force, pilots began requesting Keene's wire reinforcement by name. This small piece of metal symbol, silent, almost invisible, became the symbol of a deeper truth: American adaptability. The kind of abundance that was not measured in food or fuel, but in the capacity to rethink, rebuild, and reinvent. And it transformed the air war dot, because the moment American pilots regained control of their P-38s in high-speed dives, everything changed. For the first time, they could exploit the full potential of the Lightning's greatest advantage. Speed. P-38s could dive faster than any Zero. Now, they could also survive the dive. Suddenly, the Japanese pilots' assumptions collapsed. Their training emphasized turning superiority. But battle after battle showed them a new pattern. The Lightning would not circle, would not twist or dance. It would climb high, higher than the Zero, and then dive, dropping upon its prey with the weight of a falling star. The Zero, fragile and lightly built, could not follow. If it attempted the same dive, the wings risked tearing from the fuselage. Japanese reports from mid-1943 began to mention a new American tactic: vertical combat. They described Lightning attacks coming from above, overwhelming pilots before they could react. The Zero pilots expected the Americans to level out too soon, to lose control, to crash as they had earlier in the war. But Keene's wire trick had changed that expectation. Now the P-38 pulled out smoothly at the last moment, climbing again before the Zero could even begin a turn. In mission logs from the 39th Fighter Squadron, pilots recorded that the modification eliminated the most feared limitation. 1. Pilot wrote that he could now trust the Lightning with his life, something few had. Dared to say months earlier. Combat outcomes shifted accordingly. In early 1943, kill ratios began to tilt. By late 1943, they were no longer tilting. They were decisively, overwhelmingly in America's favor. The Japanese pilots experienced a new kind of fear. Not the fear of death. They had long accepted that. But the fear of losing dominance in the sky, of encountering an enemy who not only improved their machines, but transformed them through ingenuity. Behind every pilot now stood a mechanic with tools, wire, grease-stained hands, and a belief that machinery could always be improved. While the Zero remained largely unchanged due to Japan's limited wartime industry, the P-38 evolved constantly. Adjustments, reinforcements, and new techniques spread rapidly through American units, and the wire trick, quiet, unglamorous, barely mentioned in official logs, became part of the Lightning's deadly new identity. The recurring symbol of this story, the thin spool of wire, represented something far greater than the fix itself. It embodied a nation's industrial spirit, its abundance not merely of resources but of ideas. While Japan depended on perfect pilots and perfect machines, America relied on the collective mind thousands of mechanics, engineers, and crews continuously refining, questioning, and improving. The wire became a metaphor for democracy in wartime. Simple, accessible, born from a worker's hands, not an officer's office. and capable of saving lives across thousands of miles of ocean dock as 1943 bled into 1944. The Lightning's dominance grew. P-38s escorted bombers deep into enemy territory, hunted supply convoys, and challenged zero formations head-on. Ace pilots like Richard Bong and Thomas McGuire pushed the Lightning's potential to the limit. Knowing their aircraft responded with reliability unimaginable months earlier, a small piece of wire had changed confidence. Confidence changed combat. Combat changed the war. The Japanese Zero pilots, once certain of their superiority, now fought with increasing desperation. They found themselves outclimbed, outdived, and steadily outmaneuvered in the vertical plane. They began to understand that American machines no longer broke under pressure. Their mindset shifted from confident hunters to cautious defenders. Historical records from captured Japanese documents reveal a striking admission. The American twin-engine fighter moves beyond safe limits, yet survives. They could not know that survival had begun with a crude wire loop under a canopy of dew and morning mist stopped by the time P-38s were escorting B-24 raids over Rabaul. The Zero's era of dominance was already fading. American pilots spoke with new assurance. Ground crews worked with new pride. The Lightning had become not just a machine, but a symbol of relentless adaptation, in the war's final years. Thousands of innovations would roll out of American airfields, new metals, new engines, new controls. But somewhere in the long chain of evolution stood a single mechanic with a spool of wire, a pair of pliers, and a belief that even the most advanced aircraft could be made better by human hands. In the end, the story of this mechanic's stupid wire trick is not just a tale of engineering. It is a testament to a principle that defined the Allied war effort, that freedom thrives where creativity is allowed to flourish. That abundance is measured not only in factories but in minds, and that even the smallest idea thin as a strand of wire can strengthen the wings on which a nation rises. As the Pacific War raged on and the sky filled with the roar of engines, the spool of wire stayed behind in the toolbox, quiet and ordinary. Yet its impact lived in every P-38 that climbed into sunlight, every dive that ended in survival, every pilot who returned home to walk the earth again. A mechanic's hands had reshaped the air war. A simple wire had defied the Zero, and in the vast sky above the Pacific, American ingenuity had proven that even the smallest reinforcement could carry the weight of freedom.